Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to welcome author and photographer Marisa Scheinfeld, who will be discussing her book and her current advocacy work around the Borscht Belt. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Peggy Ann and Roger G. Gary Charitable Trust, who underwrite all of our preservation book club programming. So my name is Katie Peace. I'm the Director of Communications for the Preservation League of New York State. If you found your way to this webinar but are not familiar with the League, we are New York statewide nonprofit that focuses on historic preservation. Preservation League of New York State empowers all New Yorkers to use historic preservation to enrich their communities, protect their heritage, and build a sustainable future. The League does this work in every corner of New York in many different ways, including providing grants that jumpstart preservation projects, advocating for preservation at the local, state, and national level, providing technical assistance, collaborating with colleagues across the state, awarding excellence in historic preservation, and our call for nominations for our Excellence Awards happens to be open right now. So I'll drop that link in the chat. We draw attention to at-risk historic sites through our 7 to Save program, and we offer engaging virtual programs like this one. And now the reason we're all here today, the Borscht Belt, revisiting the remains of America's Jewish vacation land, presents a contemporary view of more than 40 hotel and bungalow sites in various states of abandonment and decay in the Borscht Belt, which is in the Catskills region of New York. Marisa's photographs, a few of which you've already seen on the slides shown, were shot inside and outside locations that once buzzed with life as year-round havens for generations of people. In her talk, Marisa will discuss the rise, fall, and impact of the Borscht Belt, along with the deeper, more layered meaning she finds in the series, as well as her current work with the Borscht Belt Historical Marker Project. Marisa Scheinfeld was born in Brooklyn and raised in the Catskills. She received a BA from SUNY Albany in 2002 and an MFA from San Diego State University in 2011. Her work is motivated by an interest in the landscape and its embedded histories, both apparent and hidden. Marisa is a current visiting assistant professor of photography at SUNY Purchase and is working on her second book. Following Marisa's presentation, she will be joined in conversation by New York Preservation Archive Project Executive Director Emily Kahn. Emily previously worked at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, as well as numerous small preservation advocacy organizations, where she developed interdisciplinary skills in archival research, storytelling, museum interpretation, grant making, public programming, and fundraising. Emily holds a master's degree in historic preservation from Columbia and a bachelor's degree in history from Colgate University. Her Jewish heritage plays a core role in her research and practice. She co-published Repression, Reinvention, and Rugula, A History of Jews at Colgate in 2018, and wrote her master's thesis on commemorating Holocaust refugees in Upper Manhattan in 2021. Emily was also one of the League Zabar Scholars a few years ago, so we're excited to reconnect with her for this program. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marisa, who can get right into her presentation today.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you to the League for having me. This book is I always call it a labor of love about the land that I love. I grew up in the Borscht Belt. My parents still live there. My grandparents went there. My great-grandparents went there in the early 1900s. And it was a 5-year investigation that really, is rooted in the history of the Borscht Belt. But the book is, when I shot it, the book was very much a present-day contemporary view of the ruins that I found. This is a quote that I'm going to lead with, and it still very much inspires me, by Cartier-Bresson. Photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing, and when they have vanished, there is no contrivance on earth which can make them come back again. And to that note, photography to me is something that I use, and I use photography as an act of historic preservation. It is embedded pretty much in every work that I make. The Borscht Belt is located 90 miles from New York City. That county in red is pretty much the main county, Sullivan County, where the Borscht Belt was located, but it also extended to Ulster County. In its heyday, the Borscht Belt had over 500 hotels and 50,000 bungalows, like small cabins. My book focuses on about 50 sites that I found roughly between 2011 to 2016. In blue are the hotels I found, and in gold were the bungalows. These were the hotels that were lying abandoned. There are many hotels that have been repurposed. They are meditation centers, rehabilitation centers, ashrams, Orthodox camps, Orthodox bungalow colonies. Some are now secular hotels and bungalow colonies. I wanted to shine a light on the ones that were stagnant and the ones that were considered these looming creatures and eyesores of failure. And in that sense, a lot of the project was kind of shining a light on the last. And looking at this map, over half of these hotels, there is not even a trace left about 6 years out from the book's release. So over time, it has added more to my reasons for doing this project, which was because I knew that there was a story to tell, but I knew that the places where the Borscht Belt had transpired were going to eventually be no more. This is a heyday photograph of the 500 plus hotels. And, these numbers are not really accurate. There is a Catskills Institute that got together in the 90s, I believe, and started to collate lists. And I work extensively with those lists, but there were likely more than 500. And it is arguably said that Sullivan County had the most proximity of hotels in the entire country when the Borscht Belt was thriving. And it was a year-round vacation destination. On the left, you see it in the winter, but you could also be inside in the indoor pools. On the top, you see this massive outdoor pool, and on the bottom, this bar. And the Borscht Belt brought together people. It forged community, culture, leisure, friendships, and people went back year after year. It also was this, like moment of renaissance of entertainment, comedy, music, and its theaters and showrooms. On the top left, the Imperial Room at the Concord, that seated over 3,000 people. And when it was built, it was the biggest in the country. Other cities like Miami and Las Vegas followed in the steps of the Borscht Belt, which really led the way. On the bottom left is a lounge at the Raleigh, and the right is another massive theater at the former Nevele. And this is a great brochure. Sullivan County, #1 in the nation for a zestful, restful vacation. My grandparents met up there. They were hitchhiking. My parents eventually went up there as kids, and then we moved up there in the 80s, and my parents still live there. I knew that when I set out to do a project about the Borscht Belt, I really needed to understand why it was created, and also why did its remains look like this scattered throughout the landscape. So I dug very deep, and it starts with the Lenape Indian tribe. These were the first people known to live in the area known as the Borscht Belt. And this is a tribal map that shows their territories beyond the Borscht Belt, present day New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and other parts of New York. What happens is a very mountainous, rugged, rocky region, inaccessible from New York City, is now discovered by European, Dutch, and German settlers. And this is a predating photography and illustration of Mongup Falls. Well, they were coming to the area for the rumored riches, not money, but wood, lumber. And this was the first industry the Borscht Belt saw. Logs were pushed down the Delaware River to build up cities like Philadelphia and New York City. This is a lumber yard powered by the waterfall. What happens eventually is that the natural resources were depleted, and the next industry that rose up was the tanning industry. With the tanning industry also came hotels, also came the railroad. So a very early wave of tourism was seen in the Borscht Belt. Most usually it was fishermen, artists, lovers of nature who made the long trek up to the county. It was also a very inspirational moment for American landscape painting, and this is Asher Durand's Kindred Spirits in 1849. In this early wave, you see a little bit of hotels and casinos springing up. But what also happens around this time, and I love this image around 1907, a very Victorian image, is that sanitarium starts springing up, tuberculosis sanitarium. And the idea is that you can alleviate symptoms of the disease by breathing in the fresh air. Locals did not like that the region was becoming known as a haven for the sick. And in addition to the polio epidemic that struck, people were told to avoid large crowds, swimming pools, and public places. Concurrently, around this time, and this is a magazine distributed in 1908 in America, Jew Jokes. Jewish discrimination was widespread and acceptable in American society. Jews were often excluded from housing, employment, educational opportunities, legal opportunities, along with being barred from social circles, vacation membership, and access. This is a photograph. It says that all privileges of the pool are extended to Gentiles only. After fleeing anti-Semitism, pogroms, and genocide in Eastern Europe, Jews continued to face it upon arrival to the United States as well as Canada. Anti-Semitism reached its peak during the 1920s, just before the dawn of the Borscht Belt. Signs: Jews not allowed, no Jews, no dogs, Christians only. Other signs said no Jews, no dogs, no blacks. At the time, the KKK membership had reached 4 million, and there were also discriminatory immigration policies that were going on. This is a beautiful brochure from the Craigsmoor Inn, which is on the Schwanguk Mountains as you're driving into the Catskills. And if you look inside the brochure, oops, sorry, on the page on the left in the middle, owning to neighborhood preferences, Hebrews are requested not to apply. And this documentation and language is seen across the board. As a result, the Jewish Farmer's Almanac made a guide. Hotels, boarding houses, and rooming houses where Jews are welcomed. It was published in 1919, and it had a list not only of hotels, but gas stations where you can get gas, businesses, legal places, and banks. I also want to note that the Green Book that was made for the African American community in its introduction here says that they made this as a model by looking at the Jewish community need for it. And the African American community certainly had a need for it. And in this text, it says that they hope for a day where both groups will not face the discrimination and separation from American society. So what happens here is due to anti-Semitism, the Borscht Belt blooms and it blossoms. And it's out of this harsh moment that a place of refuge was born. But it was also a place of renaissance. It offered a promised land, it offered acceptance, but also a community. It offered tradition, leisure, culture, and so much more. And here is where we get into truly greetings from Sullivan County, the boom of the Borscht Belt. This is an early hotel out in White Lake called the Kenmore Hotel. And there were 500 hotels. Many of them started as small boarding houses, and this is the original farmhouse that the Grossinger's family owned. The land in the Catskills is not that suitable for farming, so many people that moved up there to farm realized that they could take in boarders to supplement their income. Grossinger's, like many places, eventually found another hotel. That hotel previously did not allow Jewish people to go to it, but Grossinger's moved in. This is the original main building and the staff, and Grossinger's grew to a massive hotel. Its slogan was Grossinger's had everything. It had an airport, it had its own zip code, it had an indoor-outdoor swimming pool, Olympic bobsledding. I mean, you name it, celebrities galore. It was the place to be. But there were 500 plus other hotels. Hotel Zeiger, each catered to this mid-century modern aesthetic as you move into the 50s, and offered something different. This is the Concord Hotel, a very famous hotel that I was lucky to go to as a child. My grandpa was a card shark and played cards up those stairs. So as a kid, I remember running up and down these stairs, but they were truly built to photograph, to be photographed on. This is the Olympic Pool and Poolorama at the Laurels, which was a hotel specifically for seniors. So what you get in the Borscht Belt, the Waldemir, is a hotel just for singles. Family-friendly hotels, single hotels, hotels that are kosher style, not kosher at all different price points. Esther Manor is another hotel. So there's 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels. And this kind of echo of it always being fun is something that really resonates with the Borscht Belt. There were people, they called them tumblers. It's a Yiddish word, kind of like an MC. And this is one named Lou Simon Says Goldstein, who got everyone up out of their seats and made it really exciting to be part of that experience. Food is a big part of Jewish cuisine, as well as other cultures. And you can see this very loud, you can kind of hear the clanking of the glasses and the conversations in this dining room at Kutcher's. This is just the staff of the dining room at Kutcher's. So it's important to note that in addition to the many guests, there were so many locals that really made this region churn. This is a menu from the Nemerson Hotel. The Nemerson was one of many, but you can see the Borscht Belt was so beyond its moment in branding. There was a menu that offered like an abundance of food, almost to the gluttonous extreme. And some have said the Borscht Belt is really the model for the all-you-can-eat, the all-you-can inclusive American experience. On the right-hand side, there's all the events that were going on, both daytime and nighttime. And really the Borscht Belt catered to all of those moments. There was also the bungalow story, which you have to include. Over 50,000 single cabins has been recorded. My family were that of bungalows, and these are my grandparents who met up there while my grandmother was hitchhiking and went to a bungalow for many years, and my mom's parents who went to a bungalow colony for over 50 years in the Catskills. So I always say that it's really part of the tapestry of my life. This is me and my grandpa Jack on the lake at Kutcher's in the 1980s, where I was able to spend some time. They owned a condo nearby, and that's how we went into hotels like the Concord and had that friendly kind of post Borscht Belt moment where you were really able to go into these hotels, as opposed to the heyday when people were literally sneaking in. And with regard to the heyday, you have Paul Newman, the Brat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Louis Armstrong, Judy Garland. The list just goes on and on of the performers that graced these stages. Um, Comedy is said to have been born in the Borscht Belt, at least stand-up comedy, and this is Charles and Lillian Brown's hotel that became famous for the Jerry Lewis Theater. Very much a celeb presence. People like Elizabeth Taylor, another image of Duke Ellington and Eddie Fisher, but also dignitaries like Eleanor Roosevelt, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King, who gave a keynote speech at the Rabbinical Conference at the Concord 10 days before he was assassinated. It was his last official interview. This is Golda Meir, Prime Minister of Israel, in the dining room at Grossinger's. And this is another really great image of Eleanor Roosevelt and Jenny Grossinger at Grossinger's. Bobby Fischer set up shop at Grossinger's while he was training right before his world championship. And there's also a tremendous sports legacy of the Borscht Belt, from Floyd Patterson to Rocky Marciano, Wilt Chamberlain, who was an employee of the Borscht Belt before rising to NBA fame, and of course the great Muhammad Ali. There's actually currently a documentary being made about boxing in the Catskills, and I think it's long overdue. And then there's, of course, the comedic legacy that it's left behind with people like Rodney Dangerfield, Woody Allen, Henny Youngman, Sid Caesar, Toady Fields, the great Mel Brooks, the great Joan Rivers, Jerry Seinfeld, and the list goes on and on and on. This is a joke sketch from Mel Brooks' notes. He was 14, working at the Butler Lodge. I believe he was a musician and then asked to come in and started to do comedy. And you can see that he's working out his comedy jokes here. I've also seen similar ones in Rodney Dangerfield's archives. As time moves on, the Borscht Belt starts to dwindle in attendance, and you can see these wonderful color images in the 1970s where they tried to have singles weekends. Likely many people whose families had met up there or had gone up there were going up there as well. It starts to really decline in the mid 70s through the 80s. And these are some headlines that came out of the Times moving into the 90s. Catskills Hotel sold as meditation center. Changes in vacation taste alter the scene. Laurels seized in a foreclosure. Family resorts seeking to survive. Demolition of begins. Grossinger's selling the resort. And in Catskills, resort's death darkens the view. Many have speculated about the reasons why the Borscht Belt demised. Some say it was the boom of airline industry, and airfare became more affordable in the 70s and 80s. The cruise industry also contributed, where you can see 4 countries in a few days. The growth and proliferation of the suburbs was also a contribution. Some people say it was air conditioning. People didn't have to go and leave New York City, where it was hot in the summer, to go up to the Catskills. Others say the proliferation of the suburbs. Some say it was the era itself of the 60s, which was a dramatic and very intense moment. We see civil rights, gay rights, women's lib, the war in Vietnam. We also see in the 1960s the signing of the Anti-Discrimination Act. And this was a real key moment where a lot of people see the fall off, not only of the Borscht Belt, but of other vacation destinations for different minority groups. When I started this project, I knew that I had this tremendous trove of images to look at. I also knew, having grown up there, about these tall tales and these stories of the era. And I went into the Catskills Institute, which is an online repository at Brown University, and I started looking at postcards. And I used a method called rephotography. You take an image from the present day and you go to that same place and remake that image and try to stand just where that photographer stood. It really is this now and then, or this then and now. And what I loved about it was that it led me on this almost a treasure map. It was like a hunt for the day, this archaeological hunt that I was going on. And this is the Laurels Hotel, this bean shaped pool. And this is the pool as I found it in the winter. This rephotographic project really brought me in and it got me to the physical spaces. What I quickly realized, though, was that there was much more of a story to tell. So the book that I made begins with the rephotographic series, but it moves right into the photographs. Each hotel has a different story about why it closed and when it closed. Grossinger's closed in the late 80s, and at some point they started this new project in between being bankrupt and then being bailed out. And you can see this unfinished carport of this disused driveway where Mother Nature has kind of claimed the spaces. I began really with an obsession that continued for 5 years to try to find every single place where the Borscht Belt happened. This is the Tansville Hotel, and the only thing that was left of a tremendous hotel were these two stone pillars on the side of the road. If you're very observant and you like to take a drive, going to the Catskills is really fun because you can see as you're driving dozens and dozens of stone pillars that are standing roadside, indicating an entrance to a former bungalow colony or hotel. And going back to that 500, this is one unknown that was never identified. So there were truly so many. And I started to see this clear sense of abandonment. There was also a sense of entropy. This is the Stardust Room at the Nevele, that postcard that I showed you in the beginning. And while I feel in many ways like an archaeologist where I'm looking for traces of a former era, I don't touch, I don't manipulate, I don't move anything. These images were made and they happened because of time, chance, Mother Nature, and other forces and people that had also been in the hotels besides myself. My goal is really to present the Borscht Belt in its true form as I found it. And as a result, and finding things in these situations and these pots and pans stacked up like the chef just left work and didn't come back the next day, it presented a variety of narratives. Obviously abandonment, but then there was this peculiar, almost apocalyptic sense that was shining through. Um, then there was this repurposing that you'd see. A skate park really is what you're looking at, but this is formerly a showroom. And when I found it, the chairs were discarded in the back. And it wasn't lost on me why local kids would make this a skate park because, after a region that had such a large economic cultural boom, after that era really passed, the area suffered tremendously economically. And there was no funding to make a skate park. So this funny repurposing, I think, is something that I saw everywhere. This is a dining room at the Pines Hotel, and this is now a paintball battlefield. And of course, as a photographer, I'm drawn to light and texture and color and form. So these hot pink chairs were something that I could not walk away with. I'm shooting with a medium format camera. It allows me to make a big negative. I shoot on film and then I scan it. I like the process of medium format and film. It slows me down. Having 16 exposures really makes you have to consider what you're photographing, using all natural light. This is one of those kind of like tragic comedic images where you see this dining room that has been completely destroyed, and then someone that set up table 12. And this is exactly how I found it. I think photography can be a very manipulative, misleading medium. And with this project, it was really an intention of mine, almost a religion, to not move anything except for myself. I love these chairs. It feels like there's a conversation happening where the backs of the heads are all facing each other. And this is in the ski chalet at the Nevele. And you can also see remnants of animals. Um, this is the indoor pool at Grossinger's, one of, I believe, the most miraculous, unbelievable architectural constructions and pieces of the Borscht Belt. Unfortunately, it was taken down. And there are many places that should have been deemed historic that were not and never. And now they're completely gone. So it put forth this real desire and this mission that I had to document. Many people would tell me there's nothing there. Why do you want to go there? There's nothing there was largely what I heard, even echoes of "you're crazy." And it took me a long time to say, "Well, you're not looking," because there are so many stories here. Not only are there stories, personal stories, but there's a collective story here, and that extends not only to the people that went there, but the communities that made those hotels what they were, as well as the history of the Catskills, New York State, and obviously moving into American culture and entertainment, where the Borscht Belt dramatically impacted. And if you look in this image, I love that pristine red curtain that was at the Pines. And of course, as you move out, you see all the other effects that I found: squatters, scrappers, people spray painting, and of course, the effects of Mother Nature, who had reclaimed many of the hotels. This is the Palms. It was formerly known as Zygers and also then the El Dorado. So one hotel with three names. And all you can see is S from the word palms. It's almost like the hotel was literally being swallowed by Mother Nature. Images like this became kind of trademarks for what I'm really interested in doing, trying to capture the past, present, and the future in one frame. The past is the Jenny G building. She was the matriarch of Grossinger's. So many women led the way and ran hotels. And that's another way the Borscht Belt was way ahead of its time. But Jenny G had her own building. And when I found this room, the whole hallway had birds flying all over it. There was this one bird perched on the windowsill, and I was able to make a photograph of that bird. And that was the present moment. And then you see the future on the floor, which is this green, beautiful plant literally growing up from the ashes of a fire. When I made this image, I knew that this was the cover of the book. It really speaks to the sense of a paradise lost, the moss that is cultivated in the indoor pool at Grossinger's. It spoke to also American leisure, the American vacation, as well as the experience of leisure in the Borscht Belt. This is a very small bungalow colony in Glenwild, New York. I drive by this all the time when I'm up in the Catskills. This image I call Sleeping Beauty because I love that it feels like the pool is draped in this canopy of vines. And many pools dot the landscape. Pools are the most difficult to actually remove as opposed to a building that can just be knocked down. So you find dozens and dozens of pools throughout the Catskills. And this one, someone decided to throw a bunch of dirt in, not sure why, but every summer it flowers, and it's alive in that sense. This is a bungalow colony in Rock Hill that's currently being rehabbed, and many places and spaces are. Others have burned. This is the Tamarack Lodge. There was a fire at the Tamarack. I was able to document one of the buildings and a couple of the other structures that didn't burn. But this phone off the hook, the unmade bed, all these narratives that speak to this loss and change, as well as that greenery coming in from Mother Nature. This is the elevator shaft at the Tamarack that did not burn. And it was around this time someone, Jenna Weissman Josselit, who wrote an essay in the Borscht Belt book, she called this like a totem pole. And I really thought about it so much. And it is now what I'll talk about very soon, the Borscht Belt Historical Marker Project, which is an extension of this project, literally marking and identifying places and indicating historic markers to say that this is where the Borscht Belt took place. But I love this elevator shaft and thought it was so strong, surviving the ravages of a fire. This is a bowling alley at the Homoac. This room has been completely destroyed. There was also a fire at the Homoac last summer, but I loved this blue ball. It was like an earth, this globe. And for so many, the Borscht Belt was the center of the world for them. Basketball courts at Kutcher's. It was really important for me to document in all seasons. It revealed different colors, textures, also experiences of the Catskills, which was a year-round vacation destination. And I love that all you see are these tracks of animals on the courts. Breezy Corners was a bungalow colony, kind of I was just drive around and drive and drive and drive. And I encountered Breezy Corners. I knew it was there. But one day I drove by and I see a demo crew. And I knew that the light was beautiful that day and I needed to get out and make photographs. And I thought, oh, am I going to go through it and just like talk to them and give them my plea? Because I always try to get permission. I feel better doing it. It's more respectful. I don't have to rush and feel like I need to leave the property fast. Photography should be a slow, contemplative process, in my opinion. And I went into this trailer, knocked on the door, and there was a friend, JJ, from high school. So JJ asked his boss if I could photograph breezy corners, and they gave me a hard hat, and I photographed it that day. And you can see this is other parts of breezy corners where they were building what is now Resorts World Casino, which is on the property of breezy corners and partially the Concord. This is also the Concord Hotel, which was also in ruin. And most of the project was really guided by a sense of adventure, by a sense of discovery. But when I went back to places that I was as a child, there was a real sense of disorientation. Those pine trees were the only thing that I remembered from the Concord, and driving in, there was such a sense of excitement when you'd see these rows of pine trees and then seeing these mounds of concrete and barbed wire. And I remember like driving home that day and bawling. Other images speak to rebirth. And that's really what the project, the thesis is. It's about the growth, the flowering, and the exhaustion of things, but then that regrowth. And this is an outdoor pool that I'm standing in the deep end at the Rosemont Hotel, where a fern is growing right through the pool. And this is the final image that I'll end with, called the coffee shop, which really symbolizes, devoid of the counter, this end of this era, this almost like Xanadu, this empire known as the Borscht Belt. And in many ways, the book is an elegy to the era, but it's also a celebration. When the book came out, I was fortunate enough to talk about it, and I'm appreciative that I still am 6 years later. I was approached by a historian and a philanthropist named Jerry Klinger. He's part of the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation. Jerry offered to fund a historic marker trail in the Catskills that commemorates the Borscht Belt. His organization funds historic markers all over the country and abroad in places of Jewish importance. No one really took on the project for a couple years, and that's how Jerry eventually found me. At the time, it was 2019. I was pregnant with my son, and the pandemic happened. But time passed, and Jerry and I kept in touch. And in 2022, he reached out to me and basically was like, are you ready to do this? Because I think it's time. So I set up a small but mighty, wonderful team, and we established ourselves as the Borscht Belt Historical Marker Project. Our mission is to preserve the history, legacy, and the future of the Borscht Belt. We are locals, artists, and historians, and we are dedicated and passionate to commemorating the history of the Borscht Belt. Our mission is the creation of a large-scale historic marker trail that leads audiences on an educational and adventurous tour throughout history. It's going to be a 20-marker trail, and it aspires to permanently cement the Borscht Belt in its physical space, as well as pay tribute to its legacy. We try to put them on or near sites of historic properties or significant events, but we can't lead people to abandoned places. So we try to select locations that are public, libraries, community centers, near post offices, in towns, and all the towns that comprise the Borscht Belt, where people have to interact with them. We don't have an interest to put them roadside. I think sometimes roadside historic markers get driven by too fast. They're often in a place that's difficult to pull off and navigate. So if we do have them roadside, we really try to pay attention to parking and a real safe space. And as you can see, I'll show you some more images, but there are photographs on the markers. There are also QR codes. And when complete, the marker trail will be united by a self-guided audio driving tour. You can see the QR codes at the bottom. We didn't want to put it on the marker itself. These markers I hope will outlast me and outlive me. So I'm not sure, and there's a big discussion about, are we going to be using QR codes in 10 or 15 plus years? So we put the QR code at the base. But when you scan the code, it takes you to our website where you find a trail map, extended stories beyond the 140 to 160 word text with a trove of images and video. And the markers are dual-sided. So each side of every marker tells you on the left what the Borscht Belt was. And on the right, it tells you the specific history of that town. And this is South Fallsburg. And they're all gifts to the communities in which they're placed and generously funded by Jerry Klinger and the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation. Obviously, we want to attract people that experience the era, but my primary motivator is younger generations and people that know nothing about it. And there are plenty of people that know nothing about it living in Sullivan County today, which baffles me and makes me push even harder to get this project really like finished, because we want it to be fun. We want history to be engaging. And we want it to be something that people can look at, and see their hometown region with a new vision of pride and excitement. And like I said, we're trying to really cement it forever. We're locals, artists, historians. We work with county historian John Conway, who you can see, and these are some guys on my team. I also have some woman, Kelly Huggins, who works behind the scenes as a copywriter, but my team is primarily Louis Inglaterra. You can see him on the left in the glasses. Isaac Jeffries in the tan jacket. He's my visual coordinator and really my right-hand man for so many things. John Conway, David Hilfstein. We also have other people that are super helpful, Barry Lewis, Scott Eckers, and many different organizations in the county. There was not one historical marker dedicated to the Borscht Belt prior to our inception. So we're really excited and feel that we've kind of found a new space to share this amazing era. With each dedication, we offer free, immersive public programs for people of all ages. On the left, that's Zach Kutcher. His grandparents started Kutcher's. In the middle is a woman named Marilyn Silfin and her family. They own the El Dorado Hotel. And on the right are filmmakers Carolyn Laskow and Ian Rosenberg, who made a documentary called Kutcher's. And the woman in the center is Celia Duffy, who is about 91 years old, and she was the ice skating pro at Kutcher's. So what's been really beautiful about our events is so many people come out, from family members to locals to people that knew nothing about the region, to people, of course, that lived it. We hope to cultivate community, inquiry, promote dialogue, and inspire storytelling. We have film screenings, exhibits, author and literary events, concerts, and we anticipate bus tours, a curricula for students, and the creation of a self-guided audio driving tour, with the goal of the project to be completed in 2026. We have 4 in the ground already and 5 on the way. And these are our dates. More information can be found at maytheborschbewithyou.org. Our first 2 events are nearing us. On the left is going to be the first event to kick off summer, Memorial Day weekend. It'll be a marker dedication. We're partnering with the Borscht Belt Deli, who's going to come with a concession stand at the dedication. And then we're going to walk around the corner to the historic Rivoli Theater and watch a new documentary aptly called The Catskills. Our next dedication is in June, and that's going to be at Resorts World Catskills, which is on the site of, I mentioned, Breezy Corners and the Concord Hotel, and that's going to commemorate Kiamisha Lake. There's going to be a reception, cocktails, and a slideshow. And we have a lot of plans in store. We have an Arts and Literary Expo July 21 in Hurleyville. We have Woodstock weekend, August 18th, I believe that is. We're going to call it Back to the Garden with the Borscht Belt. We have a marker in Bethel, which is the home of Woodstock. And then we'll have round out the summer in Woodridge. And we'll have music from a local artist who has a really phenomenal recording studio there called Outlier Inn. There's also a big Orthodox presence in Woodridge, so we're hoping to integrate the Orthodox community as well. We're way more than just historic markers. We have a very diverse range of initiatives and a long-term vision for the Borscht Belt. Our markers are totally funded. They're about $4,700 each, and we're appreciated of any donations toward our programming, which is really to get this out to the world, as well as the audio driving tour. You can find us on the right at maytheborschbewithyou.org. We're also very involved on social media, Borscht Belt Historical Markers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X. And I am at marisascheinfeld.com, borschtbeltbook.com, and I'm also on social media. I'm currently trying to finish up my second book, which I'm very excited about, as well as work on this marker project. Have a full but busy plate. And I appreciate your time and hope that you enjoyed hearing a bit about this very special place to me.
Well, thank you for a great presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. We've had a couple questions come in through the Q&A. So the first is from Marna, who asked, do we know when it was first called the Borscht Belt and who gave it that name?
Okay, my brain is a little tired right now, but I believe it was a Variety magazine article in the 50s that gave it that name. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but it is Googleable. And people did not like it called the Borscht Belt. I know that, but it has become known as the Borscht Belt, and I guess it just echoes the Rust Belt, the Bible Belt, and the other belts of American history.
Great. We also have some questions about the hotels. So we have one more general question and then one more specific one, and I'll ask them back to back. So first from Isabel, we have what happened to the hotels in the Adirondacks? And then someone else asked specifically, which of the former Borscht Belt hotels is currently operating as a hotel beside the former Falls View?
Okay, so the Falls View is currently called Honors Haven. Next door is the Nevele, which has been purchased, and there are plans to open that. Right off the top of my head, the De Bruce up in Livingston Manor is a former Borscht Belt hotel that's open. Callicoon Hills is an old boarding house that reopened. It has a real retro vibe. There's so many projects going on, from bungalow colonies opening, secular bungalow colonies with a boutique experience. And it seems like every year there's something else happening. There's also a very big Airbnb scene in the Borscht Belt. I think that's a big way that people are now finding it. The Raleigh Hotel is still open. It's completely kosher and orthodox. The Villa Rome is still open, but that was technically considered an Italian hotel, not specifically a Borscht Belt hotel. But there are some hotels that are open, but very, very few.
Great. Okay, we have a lot of praise coming in through the chat, but people please keep sending your questions in. I want to ask you, I feel like a lot of our work as historians and as people working in the history sector can be very personal. So do you have a specific site in the Borscht Belt that specifically resonates with you?
Well, there's that little bungalow colony down the road from my parents' house that I showed you, that Sleeping Beauty pool. And oddly enough, I didn't ever go there as a child. There's just something special for me about that road where I drive down it and you really feel like you're in the heart of the Catskills. And I keep an eye on that pool every year, almost like I'm looking out for her. But with regard to like the hotels, for me, it was Kutcher's that I went to as a kid. Um, Anywhere from 1987 to early 2000s when it closed, and I have probably the most vivid and full memories of being a child there, as well as the Concord, where I worked as a lifeguard when I was 15, in 95 and 96 before it closed in the summer of 96.
All right, so I know you're installing markers 4 and I believe 5 this summer. Do you know what the timeline is for the full sequence of 20 markers?
Yeah, so we have 4 in the ground: Monticello, Swan Lake, Fallsburg, and Mountaindale. This summer we'll have South Fallsburg, Hurleyville, Bethel, Woodridge, and Kiamisha Lake. That brings us to 9. Next summer, we have Ellenville, Loch Sheldrake, Parksville, trying to think what else. Livingston Manor, and there's one more that's escaping me right now. We have 5 next summer, so we'll have close to 15. And then the following summer, we hope to wrap it up with the 5 more, as well as launch the audio driving tour. So I hope that it could be done by the summer of 2026 is the goal. But I'm also not going to rush it. We've had great output. The team is amazing. And I think we're doing a great job. So if we can stay on track for 2026, that would be great.
Okay, so I want to share a memory and anecdote that one of our attendees put in the chat. So Risa Holmes said, my parents met at the Homo Walk when my dad was a lifeguard, and I used to go to the Nivelle on some Saturdays when my grandmother got her hair done, and I would play games in the arcade with my grandfather. So many great memories. And with my work with Holocaust refugees in Washington Heights, I often found that people would come to me and share memories that maybe they remembered for the first time in decades. Do you find that when you're out at one of your events or just talking to people in the community that you often hear people share these memories with you?
Oh, yeah. I think, from book talks like this to talks in person to our events, I think the Borscht Belt pulls on the heartstrings. And my book also is not meant to be nostalgic, but it does channel the nostalgia. So I've had people in tears, I've had people laughing, sharing memories, going on and on about their stories. Whether, I see Risa, parents met at the Homoac and then used to go to the Nevele. I mean, so many people have these stories. My grandparents met hitchhiking and they used to go to the Concord. My other grandparents went to the Nevele on their honeymoon. So I think what happens is when you talk about the Borscht Belt, people are animated. It really often goes to a very joyful, celebratory place in their memory. With our events, like that's what I see. It's joy. It's joy, it's community, it's people coming together to celebrate this shared history and also to find out, in many cases, all the new people that are coming to the Catskills who find it for the same reasons why. It's proximity to New York City, an easy ride. It's beautiful. You have mountains, rivers, lakes, waterfalls, and people are finding out about it and they're interested to know about the history.
Great. Okay, we've had a few more questions come in. First from Marcia. Will there ever be any focus given to how the Borscht Belt impacted the locals? She adds that many worked at the hotels, many went to day camps at the bungalow colonies where they met city kids for the first time, and of course the locals whose businesses were dependent on the hotels and bungalow colonies.
Yes, so we just did a huge campaign for Women's History Month, and it was called Women of the Borscht Belt. And we highlighted 7 women hoteliers, all locals, some born and raised there, and talked about the experience of the locals, which I think is a story that's often forgotten. The Borscht Belt, it's an exciting topic, and I think it could easily go to the commercial, inauthentic realm. But truly, it was kind of this very, for the most part, like down to earth experience that brought together people. And those people that went up there were really the reason why they were able to do that was because of the locals. And there's a great book out now by Patty Posner. Her family owned the Brickman. The Brickman, and her book is really all about the local experience, and I think it adds to the really great list of books on the Borscht Belt and its history by including the people that made it what it was.
Yeah, that's so important. So Rita just shared an anecdote that I think sort of connects both of our work, yours in the Borscht Belt and mine, with urban Holocaust survivors who settled in urban locations, many of whom often talked about vacationing in the Catskills once they became established enough. So Rita shared that her father was a peddler in the Catskills and a Holocaust survivor. They stayed at bungalows in the South Fallsburg, Brizzle's Fallberg Mansion, the Elm Shade. So it seems
Yeah.
like there's a lot of people on the chat who have direct connections with these places that you've discussed.
Yeah, and the Catskills was also a place where many Holocaust survivors went. There are many colonies where survivors went every year. I been to a few colonies and photographed some survivors. And there's a great book out by Phil Brown about the Catskills and the experience of survivors finding peace and a community and like a new life in the Catskills.
Okay. A more straightforward question 2, will Liberty be included in the marker project?
Oh, yes, yes. So, that's the other marker that we're working on, I think, for next summer. It's going to be Liberty Ferndale. It'll be a merger marker on Old Route 17, which was the road that you would take up through. And then our goal is to put our 20th marker at Grossinger's, which was demolished by New York State around 2020. And, many plans have transpired for Grossinger's and other hotels. But if you Google Grossinger's right now, you'll see that there are some plans in the works, and I'm hopeful because what I'd love to do is put a marker at the base of that driveway, and that to be our 20th marker that rounds out the entire trail.
Great.
I
Okay.
see one more I just want to answer real quick. Are there any ways to get
Mhm.
involved with the project? Yes. Depending on what you want to do, we always need people on the ground. And specifically this summer, we're looking for people to help us with our events. I'm kind of like a one-woman show with my partner, Isaac. Lewis lives in Colorado. Kelly's behind the scenes. So it's pretty much me and Isaac at mostly all the events. We have another helper, David Hilfstein, who's great. But if anyone's interested in volunteering with us, we have a bigger event July 21 in Hurleyville that we're specifically looking for help for.
Great. And have you found that a lot of volunteers have joined your efforts?
Last summer we had an intern. We haven't reached out to get many volunteers yet, but this summer is the moment where I feel like we do need some more help, especially we had over 500 people come to our events last year. So as the events get bigger, it's great to have a point person at a main table all day who can speak about the project and greet people and give them promotional materials, because I'm often bouncing around, as is Isaac, where we're dedicating and unveiling the marker and then we're leading into a public program. So it's jam-packed afternoon.
And just a reminder, Katie put in the link to get in touch with the Borscht Belt project again in the chat. And you can also look it up on the Borscht Belt Historic Marker Project website.
Yeah,
Yes.
and yeah, we're maytheborschtbewithyou.org, which is our funny other website besides Borscht Belt Historical Marker Project.org.
We just missed May the 4th for this lecture too.
Yes, may the borscht be with you.
Which is very fitting, given the comedy theme of the Borscht Belt as well. Do you find that these more lighthearted anecdotes are useful in reaching people, especially when you're dealing with histories of discrimination and oppression?
You know, I think that it both is needed. You know, when I was growing up in the Catskills in the Borscht Belt, I never knew why, the reason why it was created. It was always like, well, your grandparents came up here and all the Jews came up here in the summer and this is what we did and this is part of our story. When I started to investigate the Borscht Belt and really try to understand it at age, 30 something, I was floored that that was the reason why it was created, was because of anti-Semitism. So it is very important to us to put forward compassion, tolerance for all, and especially at this moment where we see anti-Semitism spiking at levels that I think many of us never thought we would see in our lifetime. So the efforts of the Marker Project for me have always been more important, but I move forward right at this moment with a determination that's more robust than ever.
Yeah, and I've found that adding levity into these difficult histories was very important in my work with oral histories with survivors. Oftentimes, the only way I found that you could build trust with people and make talking about these immensely difficult periods of life even possible was to, share jokes about Jewish cuisine in, the United States versus in Europe, and share, funny anecdotes about kids being kids. And it really humanizes the experience. And I also think, and this is very important in both my life and my work, it reduces the victimology of Jews. It shows them as more than just people who survived something.
Exactly. I fully agree. And, most of our events are, I'd say all of them are really warm and happy and joyful. But we do try, especially when we dedicate markers, to really remind people that because of hate and because of intolerance, places like the Borscht Belt were created. And it's actually a storyline that I'm looking at in my next book, which looks at the Catskills as a refuge for different minority groups that have faced persecution and exclusion. And you look at the Catskills and you see it as this sort of welcoming place for so many groups of people. And it's quite beautiful.
Have you found that other minority groups have engaged deeply with the Borscht Belt as well? Attending events, joining on a community level?
So we've had people from the Black community and the Hispanic community come out. We've had people from the Orthodox community, which actually you don't always find in a Jewish group. You know, we're a secular Jewish group, and I think the Orthodox community is often very segregated as well. So we're trying to engage the very diverse range of people that live in the Catskills, and we hope to pull in even more people. Most all of our programs are free and encourage people to come out in the community. I think once we start to get into the local schools with the curriculum, we'll really start to be able to tap into different groups, different demographics as well.
Yeah, and we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you how you're reaching out to K through 12 children and what are you hoping they will learn from this project?
Sure. So this is something that I'm working on now, that approach, but growing up there, I have a lot of friends that work in the school district and the system. So our goal is to probably at some point meet with them and hire someone to work on a curriculum, starting probably with a high school curriculum. I'd also like to do an Orthodox curriculum and then maybe move to a middle school one. But I'm a graduate of Monticello High School up there. So between that district as well as Fallsburg district, where I have a lot of friends that teach, I'm hoping we can start tapping in pretty easily because of that local connection that we have.
Yeah. One more anecdote speaking to the more difficult histories. Someone shared, not in the chat, but in the Q&A, that her father recalled the KKK burning crosses on Stratton Hill in South Fallsburg. So
Yes,
really living memories of these traumatic histories.
I've heard the KKK had a big presence in Fallsburg, in Hurleyville, in Liberty, all the way through Wurtsboro. And there are many stories of them and their presence. I don't think that when the Jews went into the Borscht Belt, they were welcomed with open arms. But I think what ended up happening is because of the massive amount of economic the building and the jobs and the infrastructure that they created that benefited the county, the community became more accepted over time because it was a plus for the county.
Thank you so much. And I'm popping up here because we're just about out of time. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you, Emily. Before we close out, Marisa, anything else you want to leave people with? Any calls to action or specific dates that you want to say?
Oh,
Come out.
just thank you for your time, and please find us at May the Borscht be with you. We're really excited about what we're doing this summer, and I welcome everyone to hang out with us in the Catskills.